is so exciting for me because I love you. And once upon a time, I said to Kyle, oh my God, there's this guy, Josh Tongol. He's so cool. And Kyle said, he's coming on the QHC. And I was like, oh. So I personally feel beyond excited. As a rising thought leader, Joshua has spoken to thousands of people throughout the United States and abroad at conferences, universities, workshops, churches, and house meetings. He speaks on topics such as the law of attraction, reality transurfing, consciousness, religion, paranormal phenomena, and personal development, offering new paradigms relevant for our day and age. Joshua is the host of the Joshua Tongol Podcast, which is where he interviews brilliant minds, influential leaders, celebrities, and more. He's also the author of the books The Secret to Awesomeness and So You Thought You Knew. And he has an awesome YouTube channel, which is where I found you, Josh. And so many others have. And the reason why Josh is so absolutely awesome is because he presents all this information in a way that is completely authentic. And it's so refreshing and so delightful to watch him and listen to him. So I'm so excited to have you here. And with that, Joshua Tongol.
All right. What's up, you guys? Nice to be here. It's a pleasure and honor. Yeah, this is really cool, you guys. So I'll just follow your guys' lead. Leah, thank you for the meditation. And Kyle, everybody, just it's an honor. So yeah, I'll just follow your guys' lead of what you guys want me to do or to share. So
you just want to jump in now and tell us a little bit about your story and how this incredible journey unfolded, brother?
Cool. So I'll just share my journey, right?
Cool.
So, all right, it might take a while, a little over 15 minutes, Kyle, from what we talked about earlier.
We have time, brother. Just let it fly.
Cool. Hopefully this will be something that people, your listeners, your viewers can relate to. But I think if I heard an interview of yours, Kyle, you had a religious background, right? Yeah, so hopefully you can be able to relate to myself. Maybe, I'm not sure, but I did grow up in a religious home. You can call it I'll look at the screen. All right. I grew up in what you would call like a charismatic Christian background, and I'll define that for some of your listeners in case I don't know what that means. So within Christianity, there's not just like you're a Christian and that's it. There's actually a lot of different kinds, believe it or not. And I was part of the Christian faith, where we had a really heavy focus on what's called the supernatural gifts of the Spirit, where these things are operant today. So for example, these would be things like the gift of tongues, the gift of prophecy, the gift of healing, words of knowledge, things like that, signs and wonders. And no joke, I was like at the church, like the main hub in Los Angeles, where all the famous guys went to. They're the ones that were on the Christian channel. You guys are familiar with that, on TBN, and those guys were the ones that would go to my church. And so I was used to the whole environment of people, where this might sound a little bit weird or maybe really weird to some people, but I was part of the charismatic group that even would have what's called like a holy laughter, where you'll see people at church like jerking their bodies, like moving like this as if they're having a seizure, and then they're on the ground and they're being stuck on the floor. They would call that like Holy Ghost glue, things like that, these interesting names. And believe it or not, I was used to that. So I grew up in that. We call it like the revival movement, where just people be crying out, and it's very, very loud environment. And so that was my background. Okay? And while I was a kid, I was also fascinated with near-death experiences, because my mom used to share a lot of these stories to me about people who would, die and go to heaven, and they would meet Jesus. And as a little kid, I was really, really amazed with those kinds of things, with those stories. And I was just like, I don't want to have a near-death experience, though. I just want to go to heaven, right? But I was so fascinated with them meeting Jesus and being in these really interesting environments that they would identify as heaven and things like that. And so because of that background, I was very open to what we would call the supernatural. And I would usually say quote unquote supernatural, because I think it's more of like a misnomer, because I think these things could actually be normal, right? But that's a whole other story. So because of that, like I said, I grew up in that, and I was very open to what you would call spirit. And so as a kid, I had several instances where we would call it like paranormal phenomena. And I'll just mention two, just for the sake of keeping everything shorter. But the ones that really stood out to me was when I was really young, and I was just in my bedroom. It was late at night, and I was just like looking at the corner of my room, remember, I'm just a little kid, and I see this ghostly figure just like floating at the corner and staring at me, not saying a word, and didn't, I didn't hear anything. This being didn't hurt me, but I freaked out and I screamed, and then my parents came in the room and then they prayed over me. And surprisingly, I just stayed in my room. I didn't sleep with my parents because I was scared, but I never forgot that. Then another incident was when I was a little bit older, and my dad was telling me, because my nickname is Joe, right? My nickname is Jojo. So it's like, Joe, why don't you close the sliding door? And you like that name? Is that your name? I don't know. I said so, right? And so he's like, why don't you close the sliding door? So we had this really big sliding door in the house that I was growing up in, and I shut it for sure. And when I was walking away, just a little, like couple seconds after I was walking away, I heard and I saw this really bright light behind me go like that, like as if someone had a flash on, like taking a picture of me with a camera. That's what it's, what I saw. But I heard that noise too. It was like really weird. And then my dad's like, hey, I told you to close the door. And then I turned around and then the door was completely open. Right. And so I never forgot that incident. For years, I just like, oh, I don't know what that was. Is that a demon, with my Christian framework, or is that an angel? Nothing really bad happened, but those two things really stood out to me. But one of the things that I could say has been a big part of my life that I've talked about in my videos, and I also shared about it in my books, which actually catches some people by surprise, even though they've been following me for years. So I don't even know if you guys know this about me, but you guys know about my hand? I was born with only one hand. Well, there you go. Right? So I was actually born with only one hand. See, the guy's face was shocked. Right? So a lot of people, who've been following me for years, they're just like, oh, we never knew. Right? And so it's not necessarily one hand, but it's more of like an underdeveloped hand, right? And I struggle with it, you guys, for pretty much most of my life, ever since I was a kid, because unfortunately, how kids can be. They were pretty cruel, so they teased me a lot. And I really thought, girls wouldn't like me, no matter how much I cut my hair and try to dress cool. I was like, I don't think girls will like me. And honestly, that's how I really felt. I was very insecure. And so because of that, obviously I grew up in a type of Christianity that focused a lot on the supernatural. So because of my struggles, because of my insecurities, because of my fears, right, I was always like, how am I going to get a job and this and that, how will I be a cashier, just those questions that you have as a teenager, and so I was just like, well, maybe God will heal me, because the Bible says God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So this is not necessarily a healing that I'm asking for, because obviously it's not like I'm sick, but we would call it like a creative miracle, right? You would like give me fingers, right? Because that's just what I wanted. I just didn't want to be teased anymore, and just didn't want to have a low self-esteem about myself. So many nights I would just like pray and just like hope that when I wake up in the morning, bam, I'll have two hands, right? That was like what I expected for years, you guys, like all the time. And I would go to all these miracle crusades. That's what they're called, these miracle crusades, where these thousands of people would be coming together with, to see these famous faith healers from Africa and all these, places, and I would go to all those things, like the big names at that time, back in the 90s, and trying to get healed, and nothing really happened. But then the turning point for me, you guys, was when I was 17 years old, and I went to probably the most famous faith healer at that time was coming to California, right? Because I'm from Cali, and they were going to Anaheim, and I was like, dude, this is like the most famous one that's all over television, the Christian network, and supposedly miracles are happening. I'm going to go to this crusade and get healed finally, right? Because this is like the most famous one, guy. And so because of that, I told my friends, I said, hey, you guys, my friends are not even Christian. I said, you guys, I'm going to come back. I'm going to go to this crusade. I'm going to come back with two hands. Just watch, right? And it was also my way of trying to convert them, because they're not Christian, right? So it was like my testimony, like, if I come back with two hands, you better believe in Jesus, right? So I invited my friends who are not Christian. They were actually very weirded out by the whole crusade, because there's a lot of people falling down and speaking in tongues. It was very kind of like overwhelming. It could look like a weird atmosphere for those people who are not familiar with this kind of scene. So there I was at this event, lifting up both of my hands, crying, and just like, there's a lot of energy in the room, because there's a lot of sick people there, right? You'll see a lot of people in wheelchairs, people, have cancer and this and that. And so there I was, just wanting to have my hand, to have fingers. So I was crying, and then nothing was happening. And obviously my friends are probably wondering, like, what the heck's going on? Nothing's happening to Josh, because my friends were there with me. So I told my friends, take me to the stage and let the faith healer lay hands on me. Because maybe if he lays hands on me, something's going to happen, because he has like a supernatural anointing. We call it the anointing, right? It's like a power, like in Christian terms. And so we went downstairs and then we heard the speaker say, come back tomorrow. Because there was just so many people. It was a huge event, you guys, in the college, what do you call it? It's like this big event in Anaheim. So I was like, crap. All right, I'll come back tomorrow, because it's a several day conference. So I go back the next day, and then obviously didn't get healed. And honestly, you guys, from that point on, you guys, my life completely changed, like completely in like a 180. And it's funny because I read a lot of the comments from people, just online, and they think that because of that experience, I became very bitter towards God or whatever. And that's like totally not true at all. When I had that experience and not being healed, I wasn't bitter. I was more sad. I was just hurt, because I thought that, hey, I guess God doesn't do these kinds of things today. But I'm still a Christian. I still love Jesus, those kinds of things. And so when that happened, I started to question things a little bit, because I was pretty much let down. And this was when I was a senior in high school. And I found out that one of my teachers there at this new high school that I transferred to my senior year, I transferred school senior year because I got in some trouble back in my old high school. And then at this new school, one of my teachers was what you would call a Christian apologist. I had no clue what that was. What's a Christian apologist? It just sounds like a weird word, like you're apologizing for something, right? And I'll just define it for your listeners. So a Christian apologist is basically somebody who defends the Christian faith. So it's more of like the intellectual side of Christianity. So for instance, it's like if someone comes up to you and says, hey, Kyle, how do you know the Bible is true, man? It's just a bunch of BS, bunch of nonsense. And they'll say, well, how about some philosophical arguments or some historical argument? So that was me. I was that guy, right? That'll give you all the philosophical arguments for the existence of God and things like that. And so I got heavily involved in that, because my whole life, I was a very simple kid. I believed everything, especially those faith healers, which ended up being more of a negative thing for me later on, because I was so hurt of my experience, thinking like, these guys are all charlatans now. Because when I go to these events, I don't really see any healings. I just hear people claim that they're healed, right? Because people come on stage and be like, they're shaking, and the healer will be like, that's the Holy Ghost, burning away your cancer, your tumor. And I'm like, well, it's not like we can see that. And so I look back, I started to filter all my history as a kid. Like, there's what's so supernatural about people speaking in tongues, because you could just say like banana backwards, that people falling down. That's kind of like, just psychological. The expectation of falling down when someone lays hand on you, then boom. So I was like trying to explain everything. That there had to be an explanation for all the quote unquote supernatural things, because I never saw arms grow out. I didn't see someone raised from the dead, and we're all talking about these supernatural things that God did of, parting the sea and giving sight to the blind or hearing to the deaf. But I didn't really see that all those years. So what happened to me is that when I delved into intellectual Christianity, it became a double-edged sword for me, because in a good way, it helped me to not believe everything anymore, in the sense of I wasn't so gullible like I used to be, right? Like if there's a guy from Africa, like a healer, I'm like, wow, from Korea. But now I'm like, nah, I gotta question some of these guys. But it went to the extreme now when I look back in retrospect, because I didn't believe anybody, nobody, for 8 straight years. So I wasn't just a skeptic, and I have nothing against skepticism. I'm still a skeptic even to this day, depending upon the original meaning of a skeptic is just someone that just doesn't believe until there's some evidence that's presented, right? So I'm still a skeptic, but I was much more than that. I was a hardcore and aggressive critic of all things supernatural, all things paranormal, Christian and non-Christian, because of my experience, and because that's what I was kind of training to do. Because when you study apologetics, you don't just learn how to criticize all the other religions, trying to prove that they're false, right? Or other worldviews like atheism, agnosticism, etc. But you also criticize the charismatic versions of Christianity, and you kind of reveal on how they're more cultic, right? That they have a lot of weird phenomena that's not in the Bible. Like, where do you see Holy Ghost glue on the ground? Holy Ghost laughter. Where's that in the Bible? So I started thinking things like that, right? Where like everything had to be in the Bible. And so I became so aggressive that everyone that I came across with, because my whole scene was this whole movement of charismatic stuff, I was telling everybody my story, right? I was getting to a lot of arguments, a lot of debates, and I was already guest speaking since I was 17 years old. So you can imagine when I was actually traveling already, I was actually criticizing these things while I was at the pulpit, right? To the more conservative groups that were open to my stuff. And then during that 8-year period, or after, should I say, yeah, the 8th year was 2005. And it was the year of hell for me because at that time, when I was aggressively trying to discredit all of the quote unquote miraculous stuff, charismatic stuff, paranormal stuff, I got sick and I got injured. So the irony of it all, because I was a guy that if you ever mentioned to me healing once in a conversation during the 8 years, I would roll my eyes. I'm like, please, dude, this is a bunch of nonsense. This would be all over the news, if these people are really being healed. You know what I'm saying? And so obviously my relationships with my family was kind of strained in that sense because they were still into that stuff, and I just thought that they were being delusional. So if you're not a charlatan, you're just deceived. That was my mentality, right? You just don't know any better, unfortunately. So I was really in my head, unfortunately, and not so much in my heart, even though I thought that I was at that time. But 2005, so in case you guys didn't know this either, I was actually a breakdancer, actually all of my life, believe it or not. So despite my hand, I could actually breakdance because I still have a palm, right? So I could still press and I could still do all that stuff. So I've been doing breakdancing since I was in elementary school. It's actually the love of my life. I still watch breakdancing to this day, like every day, still, even to this day, I still watch it every day, even when I'm not doing YouTube stuff. But that aside, so 2005 happened and I was at a party and I just battled some random guy at a party. That's just what you do. So there was a circle there at a party and I just started battling some random guy that I didn't know. And then when I got up, like everything below my waist just got super heavy. And I just had this really, really bad pain, like in my back. And I just fell right to the ground. I didn't like slam or anything. I just got up and it just felt this weird weight, everything below my waist. And just felt this excruciating pain eventually. And then I found out that I had something called a herniated disc. Now, for those of you who don't know what a herniated disc is like, so you imagine your spine. I'm going to sound like a doctor now, right? Your spine, and in between each your vertebrae is a disc. And what happened is that you just your disc get crushed. And when your disc gets crushed, it kind of bulges out, kind of slips out. You call it like a slip disc. And then it touches something called the sciatic nerve, and your nerve just like shoots down. So it's a nerve problem, right? And so when it shoots down to my back, to my butt, all the way down to my feet. Like it was literally hell for me, you guys. Like it's not just like a little ache on the back. Every morning I would get up and I would feel like I'm stepping on a bunch of needles. It was like the weirdest thing. If I sneeze, it hurts. If I cough, it hurts. If I laugh, it hurts. And I laugh a lot, you guys. And it just hurt like hell all the time. So dude, I would just be walking, literally, I'll just be walking super slow, like as if I'm like a really old person. Like honestly, I have to hold on to rails. And literally my leg would give out. Like I'll just feel a sharp pain go shoot down and I would fall to the ground. Like it was so embarrassing. And that's happened many times. And if I'm lying down, I had all these things where all these methods of people saying this is how you could get better. I didn't get better, you guys. I did physical therapy. I had a bunch of Asian friends to like do acupuncture, it works. And then I did acupuncture, that didn't work. So obviously I actually got worse. And so keep in mind, I don't believe in the supernatural nonsense, right? But I'm still praying because I'm a Christian, and I'm still at a church. I was pastoring at a church at that time, and they were praying for me. Nothing was happening. I was actually getting worse. I was at a university, a private school, because I was getting my theology degree at that time. Every class, everyone was pretty much aware of my back problem because I was very open about it, and they would pray for me. I got worse. So obviously, you could imagine the questions that I was having towards God, the way I understood God at that time. Like, what the heck, dude? Like, God, I'm a pastor. I'm serving. I'm not doing anything shady from what I'm aware. And why is this happening to me? And then not too long after that, I had a really extreme attack in my chest one night that felt like a heart attack. And just for some context, I don't ever remember even having heartburn, you guys. So I could imagine, I know people that get heartburn when I don't remember. So if I ever did have like chest pain or heartburn, it must have been so subtle. So I never had that stuff, you guys. But one night I was at a friend's house and then had this really extreme attack in my chest where everything on my left side of my body got really numb. And I was scared. And it was so bad that I was about to pass out and I thought I was going to die. So I mean, I was telling my parents to take me to the hospital, and I was even like confessing all of my sins, like, just in case I die, right? Just in case, you know. And then it probably was a stupid call, but eventually just tried to endure it and just fall asleep, you know, just to try to knock out and until it goes away. But I eventually went to the hospital, and then I was diagnosed with something called GERD, which is gastroesophageal reflux disease. I never even heard of that, you guys, before. It's like a weird word, GERD, right? And so basically with my throat is that it wasn't closing properly. And so all the acid kind of comes up to my throat. And so from that attack, you guys, remember, like I said, it must have been subtle, but I don't remember ever having chest pains or heartburn. But that really bad attack that I thought was a heart attack, from that day forward, I had chest pain, I had heartburn, and I had vomit taste in my mouth every day, like every day. You give me like a little tiny lifesaver, right? Those little tiny candy, dude, I'm screwed up the entire day. And I was scared because at the hospital, they told me it was an extreme form of it. And I started researching it back in the day, and I'm just like looking at what it's GERD like, and that's what it looks like in my body. So fear took over me even more because of this stuff. Remember, I don't believe in healing really at that time, so I was just getting more fearful. And then 2006 happened, which was a year later, obviously. So I was enduring a lot for 1 year of both of those things. Not praying about my hand, not asking any of that, so that wasn't an issue for me. And then I met a guy named William Beeson. And here's this guy who they called him like a modern day miracle. And remember, I've heard miracles stories all those 8 years. It's all BS to me. But here's this guy talking to me and several other students, talking about how he was considered like a modern day Job. Now, for those of us who don't have a religious background, Job in the Bible was just somebody who suffered a lot. Let's just put it like that. So this guy, Willie, was like a modern day Job. The discs in his spine ruptured. So that's already wild. Like, so he already had surgeries for that. He had 5 surgeries. When you have 1 surgery, you're never the same. He had 5. He had to get 2 more. So it's going to be a total of 7. He was bedridden 22 hours a day. His left leg was going to get amputated. His family was pretty much like not in, you know, just everything was falling apart for him. His business wasn't going well, obviously. He was this really, really big guy, but once he had his injury and back surgeries, he was like super, super scrawny and bedridden. Long story short with Willie, he goes to this church to like a healing service and to get prayer. And then he heard a voice say, "You're not going to die." Like he literally heard it like out of thin air, and this bright light shine on him. And he knew it wasn't the fake healer because his fake healer was like this Korean guy with a really thick Korean accent. So he knew it was like something out of the ordinary. But when he heard that voice say, "You're not going to die," he actually got depressed. And so he's just there like in his wheelchair thinking, well, I don't want to live like this the rest of my life, right? So he goes home. Nothing happened at that moment when he was getting prayer. He starts documenting what happened, you know, and next thing you know, he has an out-of-body experience. You know, of course, I'll just keep this part short. He has this heavenly experience who he would identify as Jesus. And this figure, this said, you are going to be 100% healed, restored to your youth. Boom, he comes back to his body. 100% healed, you guys. His body is so not even normal. It's not even normal, you guys, because I know him. I would visit his house many times. We became good friends. He would pick up a sofa with just one hand easily. It's like, what the heck? It's like, Josh, when I got healed, like my body just became different. And he started to show off a bit where he got kind of proud because he started showing off his strength like he's Samson or something, you know, like, and people knew it. He could just get a can, like crush it easily. And he said, Josh, I could outdo anybody your age, you know, physically. Like that. And he's like, Josh, feel my forearm, feel my stomach. It's hard as a rock. I don't even work out. So his arm, like, remember, he was this really scrawny guy. Then he gets miraculously healed through an out of body. His son would just touch him and be like, Dad, you feel like electricity all over you. And he just plumped up. It's like the weirdest thing, right? So I meet this guy, Willie, and I hear his story. And obviously that was a phase in my life where I don't believe anything, but I started to be open because obviously I was struggling a lot. And I'm thinking, this guy might be telling the truth because he's very monotone. You know, I could sense he's not trying to like persuade us by being a dynamic speaker. He's very monotone. And he brought in medical records and documentation from UCLA, from Germany. And he even had an atheist friend, which is really interesting. One of his closest friends is an atheist who was there before his healing and even there after his healing, and he was still an atheist. And he even said that, yeah, I'm still an atheist, but I know Willie was like this one day and the next day he's like this. So to have an atheist friend like that kind of gave him more credibility to me, right? So when that happened, you guys, I went all in revisiting the topic again of healing and all of the supernatural stuff in charismatic Christianity. And, I was still a Christian at the time. I would still identify myself as a Christian at the time. So I put all my schoolwork aside because it was my graduating semester. And I'm like, this healing stuff's more important to me because I'm suffering physically. And I started to visit all these events again. It's like that my journey back in the day when I go to those crusades when I was a kid, but this time it was with a completely different filter. And I didn't go to those events where those people with weird, funky hair asking you for your money. And it was like a really different people that I never even heard of, who were former skeptics, intellectuals, who became quote unquote believers in the supernatural. So that was like the personalities I was drawn to. I was drawn to the skeptical type. So I went all in with that. And then I started doing it. I started healing, because I was reading so much on it. And when I would do healing for the first time, boom, people started getting healed for the first time. Like, I remember just trying it and someone had a cast on and the pain just went away. And then they took off their cast, like not too long. I was like, whoa, that's weird. Because I never did that kind of stuff before. Usually you just like pray to God, Lord, if it be your will, things like that. But now I'm like commanding the body and this time, like, that was very kind of new to me. So I was doing that. And then obviously when it came to my body, 100% healed to this day, you guys. So I'm 40 years old now. I know I look like I'm 15, but I'm 40 years old now. And you guys, it's been 15 years since my healing, 15 years. And my back's completely good. I was carrying a bag today, the whole day, dude. I was just chilling at the mall today, the whole day wearing a bag. If you met me back in the day, you give me a little laptop or whatever, just a little backpack with a book, I'll stink and cry, and it's been 15 years. And my body, I could eat anything I want, whenever I want. And I'll say that again, I can eat whatever I want, whenever I want. And I know people are against the stuff that I eat. That's fine. I eat whatever I want. Like I'll just have like an energy drink. Give me an energy drink 2 or 3 in the morning. I'll go straight to sleep. Now, I'm not telling your audience to do that. Obviously, that might have some bad effects on some of your people, right? That's just me because I like to eat. And I'm 40 years old now. But if my body was the way it was before, where you give me a freaking lifesaver, right? For just one look, and I'm screwed up the whole day. And now I'm eating chocolate. I just bought some Magnum ice cream bars earlier, right? I'm gonna eat that later. I bought chips earlier. I mean, all that stuff. Once again, I'm not recommending people to do that. To each his own. I'm just saying is that I know my body's not normal. I know it's not. So that's why I'm very confident that something can happen to my body. So when I started sharing healing to so many people, they were skeptical of me because they would look at my hand, but they couldn't deny what my healing, because they were with me during that journey. Because a lot of Filipinos were like in the medical scene. So they were the ones telling me, you're going to have this condition the rest of your life and this and that. And I'm like, nah, it's gone. It's gone. They were there. And so some of them were actually pissed off at me, believe it or not. They would actually tell me, like, no joke, they would be aggressive with me and say, you were the one that told us not to believe in this stuff. And now you're teaching it. And I'm like, I know, I'm surprised too. Who would have thought? I didn't expect this either. The irony of it all, the guy who's preaching against healing for 8 years gets sick. Next thing you know, was able to heal himself, thankfully. And so obviously, you guys, that really changed my life. And so I was still serving at a conservative church at that time. So I started sharing my story to the whole church. And so obviously I got in trouble for that because a lot of the conservative types don't like hearing stuff like that. They think I'm one of those wannabe fake healers. Just stick to the Bible thing. I ended up leaving that church and just going on my own journey. I didn't have a job, and that was my job. I studied, I went to seminary, but I just trusted God, and I made a living. Believe it or not, I made a living through speaking engagements every single week. It just all of a sudden the speaking engagements just picked up when I left my church. The timing of it all, how interesting is that? Just knowing that you quote unquote God took care of me. Now, when it comes to my hand, obviously my hand is still the same. So everyone will always ask that question. Well, what the heck? Look at his hand. I'm 40 years old now. I've accepted it in that sense because when I look back, it's shaped me who I am today. And let me also say it like this. Does that mean that I'm not open to having, a fully formed hand? No, yeah, it's cool. I would, but I don't seek after it like I used to, right? Because, I would tell my wife like, hey, we go to Starbucks all the time. Like, it would be nice to have like hold the 2 drinks for us. I'm like, here you go. Just like little funny things like that. Like it doesn't hurt, but I just would like people not to belittle like that if I'm open to it. Because some people say, you don't need 2 hands. Well, yeah, I don't need it, but I wouldn't mind it, right? But I'm at that place in my life where I've accepted it. and it's made me who I am. There was a lot of pain that went on, in my journey, and it's helped me to become more, I guess, understanding to people, because when I would put out some of my videos about my hand, there would be people who would reach out to me who had the same thing, or parents who have kids who have the same thing. And then they would tell me that my videos would inspire them or things like that. And then I would just tell them, tell this to your kids, and just try to encourage them, and that they're going to be okay. Because I wish I had, people telling me that when I was a kid, because when I was a kid, I had a lot of fear, like I said, of like things that a lot of people wouldn't even think of, I guess, because I was really afraid to get a job. Like I said, I was really afraid, like, how do I do that? Because we didn't have online stuff back in the day, you guys, like you just got to work at the mall. You work as a bag boy or cashier or whatever. I was like, how am I going to do this? So things like that really was a fearful thing. Like I said, even relationships, it took me a long time to get into a relationship and things. So all that to say is that I'm grateful for where I am when it comes to the healing stuff. And who knows? I mean, I could still wake up the next day and have two hands, and I'm like, hey, there you go. I wasn't even like seeking after it, which would be pretty dope too. But if not, I'm okay with it too. Just life's still beautiful. And then, to continue on with my story, are we still good with time, Kyle? Yeah. Okay. Just give me 5 more hours. No, I'm just kidding. But then, I started to delve into stuff that's not just healing, but I started to be open to other things you would consider paranormal, right? Because I was very drawn, not just to the healing, but to what's called, in Christianity at least, the prophetic. Because these are the people who knew things about people. And I'm talking about like legit, specific. They could even, I know it sounds bad, but like suppose I heard stories of people even knowing people's social security numbers and this and that. I'm like, whoa, that's wild, dude. That's kind of scary, and things like that. So, but I was very drawn to it because I saw how in other ways it would actually help people when you just kind of would speak to their lives of things that they didn't even tell you. And so I started learning some of those kinds of things. So for example, one of my first one that doesn't seem so out there, but it was one of my beginning stories, was I was at a place called The Block. It's like an outdoor mall in California. And I was at a bookstore, and just randomly, you guys, I just heard a voice say, ask her about her dad. And I was like, that was weird, because obviously you have thoughts going in your mind like crazy, but then I really heard a voice say, ask her about her dad. Very general, right? But there was a different texture to it. So I was like, all right, that's kind of weird. I don't want to like scare her away or think that I'm hitting on her or whatever, so, but I just asked her, I said, excuse me. And then I just started asking her about her dad. Immediately, she started crying. And then she started opening up about how she had some abuse going on. And my friend and I were able to talk to her and encourage her. And it was an amazing time to see that. But afterwards, my skepticism kicked in. And I was like, wow, that was pretty amazing that happened. But why did I hear a voice just say, ask her about her dad? That doesn't sound very like, wow, because, I'm not trying to downplay this, but there are a lot of people who are abused, obviously. But why didn't I hear a voice say, ask her about her dad, whose name is this, and abusing her? I didn't hear any of that. So I started to doubt some of that stuff, but it's weird that I heard it though. It was different. Not too long after, I go to school, but I was in the library, and there was a girl 2 seats to my right in the library. We're both using the computer, and all of a sudden I heard her get really emotional. She was looking at something on the screen. I couldn't see the screen, obviously, but she was getting really emotional. So I was like, all right, let me just try this again. So I started listening in this time, not listening to her, but trying to tune into like spirit, right? And then a name popped up. I was just like, oh, okay. And I said, excuse me, does this name mean anything to you? And she's like, oh my gosh, that's the person that I'm contacting. I was like, oh my gosh, I am hearing voices. And so like things like that, where they start to become more specific, right? And then of course I doubt a little, but I'm open, because like, well, I got a name, and it wasn't just like a general name like John or something like that, right? And then after that, I started joining a healing, you would call like a healing team back in California, and they started to train me. And I noticed that when I was going all in with this stuff, I started to feel people's pains like a lot. Like that was so new to me. So every time I would like walk in a room, I would just feel all these random things. And then I would ask people, do you feel this? Like I would feel something like on specifically my right knee. Do you feel this? Like, yeah. Oh, I feel something on my knee. And then I'd do healing on their knee, and then it would go away. And of course, there's skepticism there too. But then it happens so much, you guys, where like, no, there was something going on, because even if I don't come in contact with people, even back in the day, we had text messaging, and they would come to my mind, and then I would feel something in my body. Then I would ask them, and then they say, yeah, I feel that on my specific area, my neck or my back, whatever. oh, this is weird. I've never heard that you could actually feel people's specific pains by feeling it yourself. But that was like weird, I don't want to feel someone's heart attack, something like that, right? But that was something that was so normal for me to feel when I would be in a room. But then when I started learning all those kinds of things, I came to the Philippines. This was back in 2009. So obviously I'm still here as a missionary. And then out of all the times when you're a missionary, I started to question my faith out of all time, right? And not because I'm mad at God, but it was more so like I was out of the church system because I was already turned off by the institutional church system. It was just too much like a business for me, right? Not to paint all of them like that, but just in my experience. So I left that system and I came here on my own, just fully on my own, right? I wasn't even married at that time. And I just started meeting a lot of people who are just like super legit and kind and loving who are not Christian. And I just started reading up on other faiths more. Because back in the day, doing healing for so long, I was always thought that everything that's not Christian healing was demonic. That's how we would look at it. Oh, if it's not of Jesus, it's demonic, dude. It's an angel. It's a demon disguised as an angel of light, things like that, right? And so it was all like new age to me. But then I started to open myself up to other healing modalities and like quantum healing, right? Collective, things like that. I was open to quantum healing, energy healing, quantum touch, qigong, all these kinds of things. And if you could kind of tell by my personality, like when I learn something, I actually go all in. That's just how my personality is. I really want to learn, and so I went all in with that. And then I started trying those healing modalities, and I've even posted some YouTube videos. They're like super old now, but you could see it where I really did test it. And I'm like, all right, I'm not going to do my Christian version. I'm going to do it this way and see if it works. And then I would post it on YouTube back in the day, and it worked. So what I started to realize is that God's a lot bigger than we think. The universe is a lot bigger. Love is a lot bigger. What's going on is a human experience. This is a human experience. And so what I saw within the Christianity was a prophetic. And then those that were not Christian, we would call it psychic, right? But then in Christians, we would call it like words of knowledge, where you know specific information. And here in non-Christian, we would call it like a psychic reading. Or in my upbringing, we would see people shaking and having weird stuff on their back and then falling down. We would call that Holy Ghost is upon you. And then when I started exploring outside of that, people were having the same experience, but we call that a Kundalini. And I'm like, huh. So I guess what's going on is that what's happening is we're having a human experiences. And I was just so boxed into my fundamentalist Christian upbringing that we were the right way, that we're saved, we have the gifts, you don't. And if you do, you probably have it from the devil. That it's weird, but that's how I thought back then. I was so close-minded, but I eventually let go a lot of my fundamentalist Christian beliefs. And obviously that let down a lot of people. I let down my family, let down my friends. It surprised everybody because I was kind of like the golden boy to a lot of people in my circle, and say like, wow, you went to seminary, now you're missionary serving God, and now what happened? You got into New Age stuff, and then I started talking about out-of-body experiences, and so let me transition to this before then I could end, because I know I've been talking a lot. But believe it or not, my out-of-body experience actually started back in 2006 while I was still a Christian, when I still identified myself as a Christian. And what happened was that I was in the library, and this was at seminary, and I was just chilling on a beanbag, and all of a sudden I saw this extremely bright light just shining on, like super, super bright, as if someone put a flashlight, but I could hear this sound zzz, like that, like a lasery sound. And then in my head, I was like, oh my gosh, I heard about this, and then I started vibrating like really bad, as if I was being crushed by this energy. It went back, it came back several times, but then nothing happened. And I was like, whoa, what the heck was that? I didn't go out of my body, but it was just like a weird experience that lasted a while. Not too long after that, I was in a library again. There's something about this library, it's probably haunted now. Now I was on the beanbag again, and once again I saw the bright light, and it started vibrating again. Next thing you know, boom, I was in another aisle of the library, and I was like, it totally caught me off guard, because I didn't know about out-of-body experiences at that time. Remember, I grew up with near-death experiences. You got to get into like a car accident or be dying in a hospital bed. So to like randomly be out of your body was so foreign to me. So that happened where I came out of my body in the library, where I ended up in another aisle, and my vision was actually very gloomy. It was very dark. which was kind of strange, right? And then boom, I snapped back right into my body. It's like, what was that? You know, I was like, is that the devil, attacking me because I'm about to preach? Because I was about to preach later on. So I was like trying to come up with all these explanations because I didn't know that. So years later, so I kind of put that on the shelf, right? Because I was still a Christian. And years later, since I was opening myself up more to the what you would call paranormal stuff, I wanted to go back to out of body. So I started to find out like, wow, there are people who can learn and teach you how to do out of body. So once again, I ate up that material. And I remember telling my wife, I'm like, watch this, Remy, I'm going to go out of body. Just watch, and then I did that for months and then nothing happened. I would like try another day, nothing happened. And then finally, after a couple of months, boom, happened. And after that first out of body, when I did a technique, it happened all the time, like regularly. So like I said, with my personality, like I just go all in again. So I'm gonna go again, And then so I started exploring, right? Trying to ask questions like, is this real? Is this legit? Is this just like in my dream? And so we would call that like vertical evidence, right? So when I would come out of my body, I would literally just float up and I could actually see my wife. She's wearing the same clothes that I saw, when we went to bed. And I look around, everything's the same. In fact, it's so real that when I look around, like I don't even know that I'm out of body because it's just that real, but then I'm floating, things like that. And then I did that for years, you guys, before I shared it on YouTube, because I knew that if I shared that on YouTube and I was still had my Christian material up there, there's going to be a lot of pushback. So I remember just telling my wife, like, I can't share this stuff now, but I'm going to keep doing my research because I wanted to treat it like I'm a reporter, And so eventually I came out with my video on YouTube talking about how I'm no longer identifying myself as a Christian. I kind of did that strategically because I wanted to open up my audience. I was open to other people who were not just fixed on Christianity. And so I did that. And I even told my wife, like, are you ready to lose friends? I'm going to post this. I was like that. And I did that. And then what happened is that, a lot of people left, didn't follow me anymore. Like thousands of people just like left and sent me really nasty emails. And I was actually really okay. I was like, all right. So now we could kind of like just let these people go because I want to start talking about astral projection, and then all this other law of attraction, because the law of attraction was like new age back in the day to me, but now I'm learning all this stuff. And then I just shifted to what I'm doing now, you guys. And I love it. And now just meeting people like you guys, and, your beautiful meditation, Leia, and just Kyle, your heart. Like I said, I heard your interview. I think it was with Brian Scott. I think it was with Brian, right? You did an interview, and I'm like, oh, I like this guy. So I feel like we're just kind of connecting, and we just have an understanding, right? I mean, we all have our differences, but there's a certain understanding that we have, a connection. And now I'm just doing what I'm doing today, which is just sharing my heart on my YouTube channel, writing, and so that's pretty much it for now, you guys. If you have any questions, let me know.
Wow, Josh, thank you so much, man. That was profound, incredible, amazing. Like Leah said, you have such a genuine energy. I truly love your energy, man. And
thank you.
I wanted to just thank you. You have this YouTube channel that has like 85,000 followers, and you're speaking about reality creation a lot, manifestation, law of attraction, reality transurfing, and you're helping 85,000 people create the reality of their dreams. So people like you, man, are so valuable to where we're going. I can't thank you enough, man. I truly honor you. And
thank you.
Again, like your energy just makes everybody want to spend time with you. So thank you for sharing that journey, man. Like it was powerful, really, to hear all that. And I think a lot of people are going to find value in that. So one question that I wanted to ask you before we open it up, I see a lot of people have questions, is can you speak on just like maybe a couple of your favorite reality creation techniques?
Oh man, there's too many, but obviously if you look
favorite.
at my channel, right? Well, I could say one that really stands out to me because it's more personal to me was Neville Goddard's. It's called A State Akin to Sleep. It's called the SATS method. And the reason why that hits home for me is because that was actually one of the ones that I believe became very instrumental in my healing back in 2006-ish. And I didn't even know who Neville Goddard was at that time. So basically the technique is that as you're going to bed, you're going to reach that point where you reach a hypnagogic state. right? Where it's like you're half awake and you're half asleep, where you're about to like knock out, but not totally, but you're still a little bit awake, where you can control your thoughts. That time is actually prime, because during the day, obviously you're more awake, right? You're more conscious. So imagine you're trying to like imagine something that you don't have, and if you're fully awake, you're like, nah, that ain't gonna sneak and happen. You have all these doubts kicking in and like, no. But when you're
Right.
falling asleep, you're less argumentative, meaning that your subconscious is going to be a lot more receptive. Now, the reason why, like I said, this is more effective for me is because when I was sick back in 2006, what I would do is that there was a church down the street from my house. They would call it like a 24-hour prayer church. So they were literally open for 24 hours. You could go there like at 3 a.m, you guys, and you'll see a bunch of old people praying on their knees. Like that's how hardcore they were, And when I would try to like prove to God at that time, that's kind of like my thinking, got to prove to God how serious I am. I would go to this church, and the church would be very dim. It's very gloomy, right? The lights were kind of down, and then the AC was on, so I felt like really comfortable. And then I was doing my imaginal acts. I didn't know who Neville Goddard was at the time, but according to charismatic Christianity, if you just read the Bible in general, just talk about where you speak things that are not as though they were, right? Or you quote the Bible verse, by his stripes you are healed. So I would imagine myself completely healed. And back then I would imagine myself lifting weights and carrying a backpack, and not just walking, but I would imagine myself running. And then I would imagine myself eating whatever I want to eat, and I would feel its reality. And because it was so late at night, like 2 or 3 in the morning, I would knock out. And then, believe it or not, my body got healed. And so that's why
Mhm.
I found that one so effective, not just because of that, but I remember that. I remember it. And it's like I said, I didn't even know who Neville was at the time, but so I still do that to this day, like literally every night, because I see that it's so effective, not just for me, but just to clarify with your viewers, I don't tell people that there's one technique, because a lot of people ask me, what's the best one, right? If you ever want to,
Yeah.
well, it depends. It's not really what's the best, it's just whatever technique will help you reach the state, because it's always about entering a particular state of consciousness. If affirmations doesn't work for you, screw affirmation. You don't got to do affirmation. You don't got to do a vision board. You don't got to do the SATS technique. Who cares? Right? You don't got to do a long guided meditation. You don't have, it's whatever will work for you. So if doing an affirmation works, do it. As long as you get into the state. If you could feel the wish, assume the feeling and the wish fulfilled, as Leah was talking about in her guided meditation. If you just do the guided meditation and you're just hearing Leah's voice, oh, nothing happened. Oh, I did that 30 minutes or whatever. I did affirmations all day long. Nothing. They're missing the essence. You have to enter a state of consciousness where you feel its reality, that it's happening right now. If you're not doing that, you're wasting your stinking time. But like I said, if you do the SATS technique, it's powerful, because if you have a lot of doubts, it's very effective, because like I said, you're knocking out, and so your mind is more like a sponge in that sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Josh. I love that.
sure.
So I see a few hands up. So we're gonna go to Claudia first. Whenever you're ready, Claudia.
Hi, Claudia.
Hey, thank you. Hi, thanks so much for sharing all of your experiences. I can totally relate to everything.
Cool.
I've been astral projecting since I was a kid.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask a little bit about really intense healings when you do them for people. I had a pretty intense experience yesterday. Something's happened recently where like the healings I work with people are just getting almost like way beyond like what I can handle as a 3D person.
Uh-huh.
And I'm still like a little shooken.
Okay.
And I didn't know if you had like any advice for when like the healings get really intense from the other person, and just like what I could do to like ground myself a little bit better and make sure that I can handle these things.
Okay. Can you give me an example what you mean by healings being intense? Because I'm not sure.
Yeah. I had a person have a seizure yesterday.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, and did they get healed? Or is that just like an effect that happened?
I think so, because she told me, like, I could see her face is starting to get like less swollen and stuff like that. And yeah, so there's changes happening, but it's still incredibly scary.
Oh yeah, sure. So I could give you an example. So one of the aspects that I actually left out in my journey was that I was heavily involved in what you would call like a spiritual warfare as a Christian. So I saw a lot of like possessions, people on the floor looking like they were having seizures too. Now, one of the things, obviously, what you want to do is just make sure that you're not doing anything that's manipulating their mind, right? It's not like you're telling them to have like a seizure, obviously, but just to ground yourself is you want to always approach these things with no fear, right? Because the more fear you have, you can actually start to contribute to something manifesting in a negative way, right? So I'm not trying to put all the blame on us, but in a sense, though, we're kind of the one leading when it comes to a person's healing. That's why when people come up to me for healing, I don't put any dependency upon them, right? So back in the day, for example, or just think of it like a typical critic of healing. They'll be like, well, I went to that faith healer and, or no, let's put it this way. Me as a healer, I shouldn't put the blame on the other person. Why? Because they're the ones coming to us for healing. So the response back then would be like, well, that person didn't have enough faith, right? That's how a lot of people who do healing and the person that they're praying for doesn't get healed, they would put the blame on that person. My point is that it's kind of the responsibility of the person doing the healing. So when I do a healing session, I don't put any pressure on people. I don't even ask them questions sometimes. I don't want to know. So what I do is I try to create an environment where they feel safe. I always ask for permission. And I also ground myself in the sense that I have nothing to fear. Now, the reason why they could be manifesting those kinds of physical things is it could be a number of reasons, right? If you do believe in spirits, that are not as kind, those things really depends on your worldview on that. But at the same time, it could be energy that's kind of like built up, and there are people who actually even vomit. I don't know if you've seen things like that, or stuff like that happen. And so there, to be honest, it's kind of subjective for a lot of people. We all have different explanations for why these things happen. I'd say just focus on yourself, that whenever you approach anybody in healing, you have nothing to fear. Always do everything in love, always do everything in compassion, do things asking them for their permission, right? Like that's one of the things that I would do, like, oh, do you mind if I lay hands here? Or if not, because they might feel like, don't touch me, things like that, right? So, I mean, honestly, I don't know what else to say except just have a heart of compassion and love, because you sometimes I see a lot of healers. I'm not accusing you, I'm just saying in general, where people just want to see a healing. Like, oh, I want to see a healing. And they forget about having the compassion that no, these people are hurting. They're sick, So I think that's one of the things that's helped me when I was sick, is to have more compassion instead of just like being gung ho. I want to see a miracle today, man, just so I can convince my skeptical mind. And then we start treating people like these little experiments or little objects just to see, but just do everything in love. And then whatever happens, hey, crazy stuff happens. Hey, Jesus did some stuff and people manifested some weird stuff, or people even, if you do believe in, entities that are not so loving, they were manifesting even during Jesus's time, if you're open to stuff like that. But yeah, just do everything with grace. Always check your heart of like, okay, why am I doing this? Don't find your identity in these things either. The things that you do, don't put too much pressure on yourself, because when I used to do healing, initially I felt too much pressure on trying to heal everybody. So every time I would be walking on the street and I see someone with crutches and I walk by them, I would feel guilty, because I'm like, oh man, I didn't heal them, and like, if I have this ability or whatever gift you want to call it. And I remember telling myself, like, Josh, stop trying to save everybody. It's like me being as a Christian, I was trying to save everybody. Then when I got into healing, I was trying to heal everybody, realizing that don't do that. Just like relax, you're not meant to do that 24/7. And so do as your heart leads. Do everything with compassion and love, because love is what ultimately heals, in my opinion.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh yeah, sure.
Thank you, Claudia. I see Joe with his hand up. Whenever you're ready, Joe. Is he frozen? He might be frozen. He looks pretty frozen. Just gonna say. Oh, we lost Joe. All right, so we have Bonnie. Go ahead, Bonnie. We'll circle back to Joe if he makes his way back here.
Hi, Joshua.
Hello. Hi, Bonnie. Nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you. This is great. I wanted to ask you, I know it's a simplistic question, but when you say that you do healing, is it always laying on the hands, or what is
No.
your?
No. So that's I only did that in the beginning because that's what I was taught from my Christian friends, right? Because they would give me Bible verses about the laying on of the hands. But then I realized that you don't have to do that because obviously there's what you would call distant healing, or else you'd never be able to pray for someone or do healing from someone in another country or whatever. So yeah, it's more of a mental thing. So in the ultimate sense, you don't have to lay hands, right? But it could work at the same time too, because it's just like when that woman touched Jesus's garment, it's like Jesus felt the power, come out of him, right? So there can be power of touch, but at the same time, in the ultimate sense, you don't need that in the ultimate sense. So you can, it's just a method, right? Because just like I said, with when I do healing before, especially when I would do healing over women, I would be more hesitant to lay hands on them. So I'd always ask them for permission. So I would even tell the ladies like, oh, do you want to lay your own hand on that area? So I don't have to do that. But then I learned over time that you don't even have to do that. But it helps some people's faith, to be honest, because they actually believe that some power can just go shoot out of their arm. And so it's honestly, in my opinion, you do get what you believe. So you could just even sit there and chill and don't do anything with your arms. And if you realize that we're all one, right? So that person next to you, you're connected. That person thousands of miles away from you, you're still connected. You don't have to touch. It's all mental. So if you can do that, you could assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled for them in your imagination, then I believe healing is possible without touch.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to getting it too.
Cool.
Secret to awesomeness, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's a healing chapter in there. So
okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you, Bonnie. Does anyone else have any questions? Oh yeah, awesome. Leah. Go ahead, Leah.
All right, Leah.
Hi, Josh. That was so good. I got so much out of that.
Cool.
And it strikes me to ask you this question that I was discussing actually with Claudia yesterday, which is in reality transurfing, which a lot of it I do vibe with. But the one thing that makes me feel I can't really get with is the idea of balancing forces when you have excess importance and how to me it's almost like the idea, how Einstein said either decide it's a friendly universe or not, and that's one of the most important decisions you can make. To me, this feeling like as if I give importance to something and then there's some malevolent force that wants to like knock me down feels awful to me. I can't in my heart make that feel right. So I wonder if what you think about balancing forces and if you could elucidate what it means to you in a way that would be more palatable to my soul.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So when it comes to the law of balance or importance, this is really important. So pay attention.
Watch out.
I'm just joking. No, but in honesty, when it comes to the law of balance, it actually think about it more than the law of attraction, just to be honest, right? So I do teach on law of attraction, and because when I started to learn it several years ago, it was when I read Reality Transurfing. I started once again to filter my life and start looking at my old experiences and started to make sense of, oh yeah, that seems to make sense. That seems to apply when I place too much importance on such and such. That's when things start to go wrong. Now, it doesn't mean it's necessarily true, but that's how I started to understand these things. Now, let me break it down for you guys or whoever is listening. So according to the law of balance is that nature strives for balance in our lives. So ultimately, in the ultimate sense, everything's energy, everything. And nature strives for balance. So whenever there's any sense of imbalance in your life, and if nature always strives for balance, so what happens is that nature will give what's called balancing forces. So I would remove that it's like some malevolent entity. It's just nature, right? So if we just remove the evil entity, then it's a little bit more kind. So it's more, look at it as more of like neutral. So it's just the way reality works, right? So what happens is that whenever you have an imbalance in your life where you place too much importance on something, and if you look at it like that, then in a sense, there's a lot of energy there. Right? There's more energy here and there's less energy here. So because there's more energy here, you think of it as like a scales of balance, there's going to be some imbalance there. So nature strives for balance all the time. So nature is going to give balancing forces to neutralize the imbalance and bring things to a state of equilibrium. So here's how I look at it, Leah, right? And you could just take it if you will. If not, it's okay, right? Whatever doesn't make sense to you, you don't have to believe it, right? So this for me, it actually does. Because when I look back on the times when I was first a missionary, I struggle a lot, even for the most part, especially when I got married, we struggled financially. Like I just didn't even know how to pay rent because we lived off of the support of the people. So for the most part, we were okay financially for our daily living, but for the rent, it seemed like a challenge. I knew nothing about, I didn't learn law of attraction. I didn't know reality transurfing back in the day. So if you think about it, the when it comes to the 30 days of the month, let's just say it's the 30th of the month, the rent is due. So that day is very important to me because, I always got to think about like, oh man, how are we going to come up with rent at the end of the month? So every single day, it's normal. It's just really a normal day. But then the 25th comes along and there's you're like, wait, a couple more days, rent's due. We don't have the money, right? And so all of a sudden, like each day would get closer and closer to the 30th. So I would place a lot of importance on it. It's more important than the other 29 days. But here's what happened, you guys. And I could say this with 100%, this is true, right? That if you could just take my word for it, what happened was that every time we didn't have the money, when it was very close to the 30th, I would go to the room and I would like pray. Sometimes I would like break down and be like, God, I feel so inadequate as a husband, things like that. And I would just be like, I don't know what to do. It's in your hands, God, right? That's kind of like my language at that time. It's just in your hands, Lord, But when I would do that, I reduced the level of importance of it without even realizing it. I just said, okay, Lord, it's in your hands because it's due tomorrow. What am I going to do? I'm not going to speak at a church tomorrow to get money and I don't want to do it for the money, right? Every single time, Leah, every time, and this happened many times, and my wife can vouch for this, money came on the day or the day before, right? Every time I would just go, kind of have that sigh of relief for years. And I would tell my wife, like, that's a trip. Like, why does that always happen? Like, it's kind of cool because we have these miracle stories of how God provides, but I don't like living like that where we think we start worrying towards the end of the month. I don't like that though. I want to be more stable, a little bit more secure, And then I started learning about the law of balance. I was like, yeah, that's true. And then I started even looking back at my healing journey. Here's this aggressive guy speaking against healing, places a lot of importance against faith healers, ends up getting sick, and becomes a healer too. So I started looking at my life. I'm like, hey, maybe there's something to it. And then I just started to notice that it started to really play out in my own life. So even, for example, believe it or not, I had a business prior to all my YouTube videos that you guys see. I had a business before because, like I said, we were struggling financially. And I'm like, well, I don't want to live like this forever. So I started up an LLC. I had my own business at the time, importing stuff from Asia, this and that, and which we basically accrued up a lot of debt. There was a lot of debt that was piling up, like over 25 G's, like for years. And I was like, man, I can't even get it low. It's like I'll just put it down a G or 2 G's and it just goes right back up again because of all the interest. And so for years, Leah, for years, unfortunately, I couldn't get rid of the debt. It's just like I would lose sleep sometimes. Like, man, what the heck, dude? I invest more money, put down another, import more, manufacture more goods to try to pay off the debt. And then next, it just get worse again. I bring it down and bring it back. I don't know. And then I learned about the law of balance, right? Here's what happened. When I started placing importance of it, I stopped looking at my account, my Chase account, right? So I still got a Chase account back in the States. Because back then when I look at my account, I'm like, oh man, how do I get rid of that? I can't do it. And we still got our bills to pay in general, right? But then I started learning about the law of balance. If this law of balance is true, I'm not even going to focus on that. I'm just going to do what I love and not even worry. And I'm telling you, Leah, which is a couple of months, boom, all the debt was paid. Then when I remember I saw the 0 balance in my Chase account and I screenshot it to my wife. I said, hey, Remy, check this out. I said, Rem, when I saw that 0, I felt no different. Because I remember when I made that decision just a couple months back that I'm not going to focus on it. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to do what I love to do, right? Which is teaching, speaking. And if I did place a lot of importance on it, here's how I would have reacted, Leah, if I placed a lot of importance. When I saw that 0, I would have been like, oh my gosh, thank you, God. There was none of that. Not that I didn't have gratitude, but I didn't have a lot of energy there of importance. Now, let me make a distinction though. when I'm saying that there's no importance, I'm not saying that you don't care about things, right? Of course, you want to care about your loved ones, you want to care about your children. But what I am saying is when you're placing importance, you're worrying. Because there's a sense, here's a word that I think could be, make it a lot more, it could give it more sense. If there's a dependency upon something, then you're placing a lot of importance on something. So for example, when someone says, someone gave me this question during a Q&A. So, well, Josh, my boys love basketball and they watch that documentary with Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan. You got to be passionate and be obsessed with it and this and that. I said, oh yeah, there's nothing wrong if your kids love doing that. But if they go to practice and they use language like this, well, if I don't make the team, then I'm a loser. If I don't make the cut, then my parents are not going to be proud of me, things like that. So I was telling it to the mother when she has been, that's when you notice that they place too much importance upon their basketball. There's nothing wrong with being passionate, but it's different from being passionate and doing what you love and then becoming dependent upon something, meaning that if you don't do this, then I'm screwed. If I don't do this, I'm nothing. If I don't do this, no one will be proud of me or I don't have any value. Then you know that you place too much importance. And so I give this to people all the time. I coach people every single week, grown people, and they still talk like this to me, Leah. I won't mention any names, but there are some people I say, okay, if your business doesn't make it, what are you gonna do? Oh, I'll be a loser. They would talk like that, these grown people, 50 years old, 60 years old, and they're still thinking like that. And so here's what I tell people. Whenever you approach anything in life, you have a business venture, when you do it, you treat it like a game. Even if you want to make 6 figures, 7 figures, you want to just treat it like a game where you just want to have fun. You want to make this much money. But if you say, if I don't make that much money, then I'm just an idiot, man. Everyone's going to be disappointed in me. Then you place too much importance on it. So what I tell people is that here's what you do. When you have a goal, don't place too much importance on it. And if it doesn't work out, you still tell yourself, I'll still be okay. That's the difference. But if you have a goal and you say it has to work, there's going to be no plan B, because that's what the motivational videos people say. There's no plan B. It's got to be plan A. I have nothing against having a plan A if there's no importance. But if you have too much importance where there's a dependency upon it, right, then you got to have a plan B. Not because you're going to fall back on plan B, but you entertain the idea of a plan B just to decrease the level of importance. Then once you decrease the level of importance energetically, plan A becomes very easy. So that's how I've seen it in my own life, Leah, because when I make money now, and I'm not ashamed to say that, I'm glad with how we've suffered enough, to be honest, like all the years, like my wife, she stuck with me during some really rough times. And when we were struggling, I would cry many times when people send me a donation, right? Because there were times when I first moved to the States. It's like, God, what's going on, God? I mean, you got a question, right? If you're like, with this kind of worldview that I had, like, God, you're supposed to provide, but we're struggling, right? And I've heard all the theology where people say, well, God's testing you and this. I'm like, well, he's been testing me for a long time, man. Like, what's the point? Like, we're fighting. Me and my wife are fighting. It's just like, it's not helpful, right? And then when I started not to worry about it, and I just do what I love, right? I was vibrating at a higher frequency, if you want to use that kind of lingo. Don't even think about all the other stuff. Everything just follows. So when we make a lot of money, we can just put down several thousand for whatever investment. Boom, it's easy. But back then, I placed a lot of importance. Like, if I put that much money, I don't have any of that, to be honest. I don't have that kind of thinking. So in my own life, Leia, it makes sense to me. And if it doesn't make sense to you and you still have a question, just start testing it. Right. But I wouldn't use a word like malevolent. This is just the way nature works. Right. Because that's what I tell people, that when something chaotic happens in your life is because energetically your life's imbalanced somewhere. Like if you're working too hard, even if you have a sincere desire to provide for your family, you create what's called excess potential. There's too much energy there. That's excess. You're providing with a good intention to provide, but then you're neglecting your wife. You're neglecting your husband. You're neglecting your kid because something has to give. Right? Because your life is out of balance. And so when suffering comes, I tell people it's not God punishing you. It's not the universe testing you. It's just the way nature works, you guys. You just got to relax. You got to take a breather and just watch. Things will start to flow a lot more smoothly when you don't have any importance anymore, when you don't have a dependency upon it, right? So once again, to clarify, you can care for something, but don't worry about it. Right. That's the main thing. So I could care for my family. I could care for my biological family states, my wife, but I'm not worrying about them. The more you worry, right, what do? You start attaching that very thing that you're wearing, because energetically you start to get the very things that you love to hate, believe it or not, right? So Vadim even talks about that. So that's one of the wild things about, like, you imagine someone says, I'm not gonna marry an alcoholic because my dad was an alcoholic who abused me. I will not do that. So energetically, they're at that vibe where just like they don't. It's not just an intellectual thing. They're energetically, they don't want it. So they place a lot of importance on it. And because nature always strives for balance, they don't want an alcoholic, right? How do you give balance to that? You give them an alcoholic. It's not because nature is evil or punishing them. That's just the way nature works. But if you kind of chill, right? You just relax. It has nothing, because in the ultimate says, not to sound woo-woo, right? We're God. We're the ones creating these things. As Neville says, you are the operant power. You are. And my understanding back then was that there's this theistic God that's out there saying, yes, no, not now, maybe, it's his will be done. It was very random, very unreliable in my opinion. And that didn't really get me anywhere. And for me, that it kind of creates, like, this is just my opinion, it could almost create like a defeatist mentality. Because when I was sick and everyone was just telling me, you just leave it up to God, that didn't get me anywhere. I was just still sick. But when I realized that the power is in me, that Josh, you got to make a decision. You got to decide that you're going to heal your body. Then I did that, right? But then again, if importance were to come into play, it would have been a different story. So when you do try to manifest something, as Vadim says, you take that same energy as you would do as you're going to the mailbox to get your mail. And then you just take that same energy where you manifested that, you have an intention, I'm going to get my mail at the mailbox. There's no importance there. You just do that. Take that same energy, apply that to the quote unquote big things. But the problem is people shift their energy when there's a quote unquote big thing. They can manifest their favorite dinner. Oh yeah, $50. I don't mind spending. It's a little bit big. And there's this other thing. Oh no, how am I going to do that? Once you start worrying, that's a sign of too much importance. When there's fear, when there's anxiety, those are signs of importance. Decrease the level of importance by thinking of a plan B. Once again, not because you're going to have to go through plan B, just entertain it just a little bit, just to decrease it. Like, yeah, if I don't get my favorite food tonight, I'll be okay. Things like that. And next thing you know, you get your favorite food. You know, like simple things like that. And then you apply to everything else in life, right? Because it's really about balance. Right? Does that make sense?
I loved it. It filled in just the little bit of where I almost was.
Okay,
and
cool.
It was the perfect answer. Thank you so much.
Oh, cool. I'm glad it makes sense. But yeah, just keep question everything that I say.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Leah.
So Josh,
yeah.
Is there any ways you can think of that the Quantum Healing Collective can support you? I know everyone's going to go read your books and they're going to subscribe to your YouTube channel, but is there any way we can support you?
I guess the way you guys can support me is just love your lives, live your lives, man. Honestly, I don't really ask people for things for the most part. It's like, you know, I no one told me to put these YouTube videos up. I was even doing that when we were struggling financially. All I want to see when I was a Christian and when I got out of my fundamentalism was just to see people live a better life, because that's what I wanted for myself. You know, so when I get emails from people telling me on how their lives have changed because of the stuff that I shared, that always touches my heart. So I guess one way that you support me in a way is that just do the things that I encourage you guys to do in my videos. Just apply to your lives, live life to the fullest on your terms, despite what other people say, where you want to be fulfilled, and not just do it because that encourages me when I see people live their life to the fullest, right? Instead of just doing whatever else the people are expecting of them, family, friends. Follow your heart, you know. And yeah, I just love seeing people's lives change. So just do your thing. Follow your heart. That's how you support me. Follow your heart, because I tend to say that a lot in my videos anyways, because your heart knows what's best. And I think for years I didn't listen to my heart because of just the expectations from family and friends, and you know, just my whole life would change if I followed my heart. And I'm glad that I did. So you're gonna lose some people, but you're gonna gain some people in your life. And who would want to live the rest of their lives not following what they're hearing inside? You know, because like I said, I told my wife this years ago, right? And not to sound all overly dramatic, but I really did tell her this when I first met her. I said, you know, Remy, I don't want to live the rest of my life trying to please other people. I want to know that when I leave, I'm not trying to scare you, Remy, but when it's time for me to go home, I want to know that you could say that your husband was true to himself, and that, you know, our kids could say, Daddy was so real and he followed his heart despite what people said. I want to be that type of person. So I made that decision to do that. And if other people can do that, oh, that gives me so much joy, right? You don't even have to tell me that, but like, just if I just know that if you guys do that, yeah, your life will never be the same. Because your heart knows what's best, and you'll always be taken care of when you follow your heart.
Wow, brother, that was such an incredible meeting. I look forward to continuing our friendship. The Quantum Healing Collective truly loves you,
Yeah, you
man.
guys are awesome. You guys are
So
awesome, man.
I think it'd be awesome to have you back at some time. So
Yeah, let me know. Let me know.
yeah, so thank you. What
Yes.
we do now is we close with a prayer for all those
Okay.
awakening at this time. So
Cool.
what we do is we reach out, we try to lock
Okay.
arms energetically. So envision your hands locking with the person next to you.
Cool.
We dedicate the merit of this meeting to all of those awakening at this precious time. May our efforts to better ourselves help shift the planetary consciousness from fear into love. May this energy ripple out into the world and awaken those with closed hearts, illuminate closed minds, and inspire all to live within the presence of